Welcome back, friends. As I told you earlier, now we are going to discuss the structure of ecosystem, or it's also known as the components of ecosystem. As you all know that ecosystem are composed of what? They are composed of community of living organisms and the physical environment. That is, there are two major components of an ecosystem. The first is the living organism, and the second is the environment, that is the air, water or soil. Now these are the two major factors or components of an ecosystem. Likewise, these two components are categorized as the abiotic components and the biotic components. That is, there are two major components which comprise an ecosystem, and that is the abiotic component or the non-living component and the biotic component or the living component. The non-living component comprises of the air, the water, the soil, the temperature, the light which are present around the living world. So the abiotic component are the non-living components of an ecosystem, and the biotic components are composed of the living organisms, that is the various kinds of animal, plants and microorganisms residing inside that ecosystem. So the abiotic component or the non-living component, the major abiotic components are five. They are light, water, air or mixture of gases or winds, the temperature and the soil. These five factors form the abiotic or non-living components. The biotic or the living components or the living organisms have further been categorized as the producers, the consumers and the decomposers. That is, all the living organisms, that is all the plants, animal and microorganisms have been categorized as the producers, the consumers and the decomposers, and together these three form the biotic or living component of an ecosystem. Okay, now have these in detail. Now, as I have earlier told you in the biosphere chapter, biosphere heading, that the first essentiality for life to sustain is light or energy, which primarily comes from sun in the form of light. So the first abiotic factor affecting an ecosystem is the light. Friends, we all need light for our survival. Without light, we cannot survive. How? Now, if we take the example of we the humans, we are dependent on plants for our nutrition, and plants does what? They use this light directly and perform photosynthesis, and in that photosynthesis they prepare nutrients or organic compounds for us. That is the plants consume this light directly and they perform photosynthesis and form hydrocarbon or nutrients, which primarily they consume for their metabolism, and then when we consume those plants, those nutrients are transferred to us. So light is the first essential component of ecosystem for life to survive. Second is water. Again, we all know that without water we cannot survive even a single day, because every metabolic activity of plants, animal or generally plants and animal are dependent on water. So water is essential for the survival of living organisms. So our second essentiality or abiotic factor is the water. Now as you have must have studied in your schools, that depending upon the consumption of water, plants can be of different types. They can be the hydrophytes growing inside water, the mesophytes requiring average amount of water, and the xerophytes growing in desert kind of condition. So these are the different requirements of water for different plants. Likewise, we humans or animals too need water for our survival. The next is air or mixture of gases. As we have earlier discussed, that essential gases are dispersed in the atmosphere, that is the troposphere. Essential gases like the oxygen, the carbon dioxide, the hydrogen, the nitrogen, and these gases, as we have earlier discussed, that oxygen and carbon dioxide are essential for our survival, because we use oxygen for our breathing and plants use carbon dioxide for photosynthesis. So without these gases we cannot, or life cannot survive. And from where these gases come? They come from the air. So air or gases is a third essentiality of life. Next we have temperature. Friends, temperature is also very essential component for life to survive. How? As we all know that we humans feel chilly conditions in winter months and very hot in summer months. Why? Because our temperature of body is static at 37 degrees Celsius. Anything above that will create hotness inside our body, and anything above that gradually will create winter-like sensation inside our body. So every organism, be it humans, be it animals, or even the plants, they need an optimum temperature to attain their metabolic best. Every organism needs an optimum temperature for their metabolic best, and that is why temperature is another very essential component which determines the quality of life inside an ecosystem. Next we have, friends, soil. Now, as we all know that almost all the essential nutrients which plants and animals require for their metabolism are distributed in soil. So the amount of nutrients present in the soil and the texture of the soil, the pH of the soil, and the temperature of the soil, or the inclination of the soil, all these things are very important, and these factors determine the level of vegetation. The level of vegetation, that is, so the structure of this soil determine what kind of vegetation will be present or what kind of plants will be present in that ecosystem. And depending upon the quality of vegetation, the survival of animals or the quality of animals found in that ecosystem will also be affected. So soil is another major abiotic factor determining the quality of life inside an ecosystem. So these were the abiotic or non-living factors. Next we have the biotic or living factors. As we all know that plants, animals, and microorganisms form the biotic factors. These are further classified as producers, consumers, and decomposers. What is that? Producers, generally plants on a land ecosystem and planktons in a water ecosystem, are considered as producers. Why? Because they are able to manufacture their food independently. That is, they are competent enough to meet their nutritional requirement for themselves. That is, they prepare their own food, or they are able to meet their nutrition requirement from themselves. That is why producers are also known as autotrophs. Example, the terrestrial plants or the aquatic plants or planktons. Or some algas also. So these are considered as producers or autotrophs. Next are consumers. Consumers are those who survive by consuming the nutrients produced by these producers, or consuming the producers or like plants alive. Consumers are those who consume the producers or autotroph to meet their nutritional requirements, or consumers or heterotrophs are those who are dependent on these producers or autotroph for their survival or to meet their nutritional requirements. Okay. Next we have decomposers. They are what? Decomposers are those who decompose the dead remains of producers and consumers, like the earthworms, the bacteria, some algas. They form the decomposition, and what is their function? Their function is to decompose the dead organic matters left by producers and consumers. So these are the three major factors which combine to form the biotic or living components: the producers or autotrophs, the consumers or heterotrophs, or the decomposers or separotrophs. Now these consumers are further been classified as primary consumers, secondary consumers, tertiary consumers. The primary, the secondary, and the tertiary consumers, what are they? Now friends, the primary consumers are those who directly consume the producers, or such animal who directly consume plants are known as primary consumers or herbivores. For example, grasshoppers, cows, elephants, some insects. So these grasshoppers or cows, they directly consume the plants or producers. That is why they have been categorized as primary consumers, and as they consume the herbs or plants, they are also known as primary consumers or herbivores. The second is the secondary consumers. They are what? They are small carnivores. That is, such animals or such organisms who eat or consume these small organisms, or these primary consumers are known as secondary consumers. That is, there are certain animals like the dogs, the fox, or other animal who can consume or who can eat these tiny animals like the grasshoppers and other insects. So these dogs, these fox form are secondary consumers, and as they consume the primary consumers, that is why they are also known as small carnivores. As they consume or eat the herbivores, they are also known as small carnivores like fox, dogs. The next level of composers is the tertiary consumers or large carnivores. What are that? Now, tertiary consumers can consume or eat the secondary consumers. That is, for example, lion, tigers, they are able to consume or eat the herbivores and the secondary consumers. So they are able to eat or consume the primary consumers as well as the secondary consumers, and that is why they have been classified as tertiary consumers. Normally they compose of large carnivores like lion, tiger, panthers, etc. Man is also considered as a tertiary consumers because man also consume small animals like the goats, etc. So it's also categorized as the tertiary consumers. So these are the three kinds of consumers, and these are the whole structure or whole components of an ecosystem. In the next chapter, we'll study about the some different functions of a ecosystem. Thank you.